Welcome to the Date Forever podcast. Keep your relationship fueled up with strategies discovered by couples and experts. Because at Fuel Collective, we believe better relationships will equal a better world. You are about to discover specific insights and tools that cost little or nothing to implement to help you date forever. And now, here are your hosts, a couple who always have a half-packed suitcase and a date night in the calendar, Sammy and Nathan Yeager.
Hello and welcome to a brand new week of Date Forever. In this week's episode, we're chatting about the importance of understanding who you are as an individual before entering a relationship, what it means to be fully committed in a relationship, and creating clear communication with your partner. But before we get into it, Sammy, what's been fueling you up this week?
This week, the thing that probably fueled me up the most it's probably a little bit materialistic, but I got new glasses, new prescription glasses so I can see properly, which is amazing.
Yeah.
But I also got a new toy. I got a new Apple Watch.
Amazing.
Yeah. So I have been struggling a little bit with my fitness and routine and just figuring out I had to try to do a bit of a yoga challenge earlier in the year. I've tried to keep up my daily step count and I've just been struggling to find my thing, and I've just had my first surf lesson the other week, but I am a big believer that what gets measured can get improved. So I'm nerding out over the data and the numbers and completing my rings. I know that Apple Watches are not a new thing, and I've had Fitbits and stuff in the past, and I have found that information really valuable. So I've just been enjoying playing with that new kind of thing, and it has kind of been helping me keep motivated a little bit.
And just leveling up a bit too.
Yeah, leveling up a bit and taking some accountability because the numbers don't lie.
No, they don't. Not at all.
So what about you, Nath? What's been fueling you up?
So what fueled me up this week was actually having a bit of downtime on Saturday. So we weren't really planning it, and we did kind of have plans to be a bit more productive than what we were, but it was so nice to have a full day of no activity, nothing to do, and just to be able to hang out. And yes, we probably didn't use it in the most productive way by binge watching a couple of mini-series, but it was really nice to have a little bit of downtime. And I think it just kind of reinforced how important it is to actually take time away from business or activities and things and have a little bit of time that is just for relaxing.
And it was torrential rain in Sydney.
It was, so it was perfect weather for it.
Yeah, so maybe that's a little bit of an excuse, but we wrapped ourselves in a cocoon, didn't we?
We did. It was quite delicious though.
Yeah, and then I still slept for 10 plus hours that night. So I must have been really needing the actual lazy recharge.
I think we've been burning the candle at both ends for a little while. So it was definitely nice to have that downtime. So now here's this week's guest.
Today we're welcoming back to the show Max Latimer. If you're a dad or soon-to-be dad, Max is the guy to seek out to take full ownership of your life. He's worked with over 100 dads from all walks of life, from stay-at-home dads through to CEOs, business owners, and professional athletes. His philosophy is simple: own it, live it, have it all.
As dads, we've forgotten to be men first. It's time to discover who you are, drop the excuses, and do more of what matters. Welcome to the show,
back, Max.
Hey guys, thanks for having me.
So congratulations are in order. You've become a dad since we last had you on the show.
I have. A few things have changed. I've become a dad, and I've switched it over from what we were talking about originally, so sort of going from men to dads. So yeah, it's all a lot more relevant for me now, and just allows me to be a little bit more pointed with everyday life. I kind of think about everything anyway, so why not have conversations with these guys, because I know how important it is, my relationship with my dad and my relationship with all my mates, and they're all dads, so it seemed like the right time to make that move.
How long has the little one been earthside?
8 weeks, almost 8 weeks.
And how is it so far?
Yeah, it's been really good. I didn't have any expectations. One of the things that I took into being a dad was I wanted to have fun. And that's a lot easier said than done, because prior to that, for say 12 months trying to run a business, I wasn't having a lot of fun because there was a lot of shit going on that I was just like, this is difficult, and I'm sure you guys can relate. This gets hard, it's challenging. But I didn't want to bring that into his life. Is it to say that it's now easier because he's here? No, it's actually harder. However, it's brought out the little kid in me again, which is great, because now I can just be a bit silly in between calls, and everything's a little bit lighter. So yeah, I'm enjoying it.
Yeah, awesome. Hey, so we absolutely loved our conversation last time you were on the show. We were really talking about responsibility and accountability for the way that you show up in your relationship. And I guess the conversation that we kind of want to have today is twofold. It's about being your whole self and becoming a complete human being without your partner, but also the responsibility and direction of guys as they become dads and make this transition that you've recently made. So maybe we'll start on the whole person piece. You and I were having a really cool chat about the different elements that make up who we are as a person, you know, as a friend, as a wife, as a husband, as a sister, daughter, you know, employee, boss, manager, whatever that might be. It kind of tied back to this conversation of that maybe a little archaic phrase of referring to your partner as your other half, and that phrase implying that you are incomplete without them. So I'd love to hear your take on this.
Yeah, it's a really good question, a great point, is that your other half, like, yes, physically, it's the other half to your relationship, but going into a relationship, you need to have your own shit sorted before you go in that relationship. And what I mean by that is that being whole is one thing, but just understanding where your pros and cons are, your weaknesses and your strengths are. You don't have to have it all figured out, but you do need to have a level of understanding about who you are as a person. What triggers you, what sets you on fire, what do you love, what do you hate, what sort of people do you like hanging around, what sort of things do you like to do, are you comfortable and confident in conflict, like can you have conversations with people, especially your partner, about the hard stuff? Because one thing I see a lot of, and I reflect on my relationship a hell of a lot when it comes to this, is it's that postcard version of your relationship is essentially that honeymoon phase when you start. Right, and we don't tend to show our full selves in that point. I've found through the different guys I've been speaking to and the relationships that I've got with different people that we tend to, the older we get, have less of the fluffy bullshit. It's more clinical when you come into a relationship, right? But when you're younger, there's this sense of, I need to put that perfect version of myself out into the world. And if I don't, then they won't like me. But what ends up happening is that it's all those quirky little things that make a relationship, the challenges, the indiscretions, the massive fuck ups, that are actually the thing that glue it together. Because if you don't have any challenge, you can't get stronger. It's like going to the gym. But you need to have that challenge. And if you keep shying away from it, you're never going to get bigger muscles. You can't walk around the gym and just kind of go, oh, I'll just go back to the elliptic walker, or I'm just going to go over and, I'll do a push-up here or there. It's like at some point you're going to have to lift something heavy. Otherwise, you're just going to waste your money. You're going to waste your time. And it's going to be a poor use of your time in general. Not to mention, the biggest thing is that you're wasting the other person's time if you're not honest with them about what you want from this relationship because you're too scared and afraid of what you think they might say. So if you're not going into the relationship understanding what it is, it's like typically for a guy, and I know I've said it a bunch of times in previous relationships, is that, I just want something casual. That's a typical guy response to hedge his bets because if something better comes along, he's cool to go and get that. However, there's going to become a point in time, it could be 6 months for some, it could be 3 months for some, it could be 12 months, it could be 5 or 6, 7, 10 years for others. When you get to that point, you flip over and you go, I want this to go further. And that's where commitment really takes hold. If you're not committed to it, then it's just never going to work. It took me probably better part of 9 years of our now 14-year relationship to realize that I wasn't committed. And there's a shitload of stories about how I did not show up properly in our relationship to not get. So don't be like me in that sense, but you can definitely learn from my mistakes.
Max, it's interesting. You're not the only guest who's said that they were in a outwardly presenting committed relationship, but in reality, they still had one foot out. In some of these conversations, that person was married. They were married to each other, and yet there was still a sense of, I'm not really all in. Like I can still back out or back away or keep my options open if I needed to. So I'd be curious to know, what was that moment for you where you were like, oh, fuck, I am actually going to go all in on this?
I was at a personal development course, and it was in that course they started to talk about integrity and commitment. And that was where I was, and my partner and I at that particular point in time were actually living in two separate areas, not because we'd had a breakup or anything, but because my job had me in Brisbane and everything we owned and had our properties, and she was doing a PhD and all this other stuff. that was all up there. So she needed to be up there for that. So we're actually apart for 14 months. We weren't married at the time, but I was at that point where I really wanted to grow, and she was supporting me, and I was on this mission. So that masculine energy inside of me, he was out there searching for the thing that made him of value, because I came into the relationship far from whole, far from like figuring my stuff out. And that's why our relationship's been so challenging, because Jackie's had to feel the full force and the full brunt of me trying to figure this shit out. It was like drugs and alcohol and us breaking up because I didn't know what I wanted, and all these different things. Like I think I mentioned the last time we spoke, is that, I cheated on her 2 years in. Like we went through all this stuff because I had no idea, and then I figured it out. I went, I need to figure out what I needed to do. So as I was going through that process, it popped up as a commitment thing, and I was like, holy shit, I say I'm committed all the time. But my biggest problem is that I only say it. I don't actually do it, show it, be it, own it, live it. I don't do any of that. And it's like if you were to ask someone, try this out as a test, and ask someone if they have integrity. If you can weasel it into a conversation somewhere, or you can get it into a conversation, however you get it in there, because it's kind of a weird one to just reach out and ask somebody. But if you can ask them and you say, hey, what do you think about integrity? Do you think you've got integrity? 9.9 times out of 10, people will say they do, right? What we say and what we do are two different things. And that's what I realized, is that my commitment to my relationship was not what I wasn't showing up like that. And the kicker is that my partner, Jackie, she knew that. She knew it. She didn't articulate it in that way. And this is a big trap for a lot of players, is that your wife or your partner or your boyfriend, whoever it is, on the feminine side of it, they're not going to share that information with you because they don't even know what it is. They just see what's going on out there, but they can see you don't show up. They can see that your word doesn't match your actions. So until you start to actually match your actions up with what you're saying, and then slowly over time, you can build the trust up, the believability in your word up, your relationship's going to be a little bit fragile, a little bit frail. So whenever you say to your wife, I'm going to do this, or I'm going to do that, or I did this, or I did that, or whatever it is, and she doesn't get it, or your partner, girlfriend, whatever, it doesn't matter who it is, say that to them. What you say and what they hear are two different things, right? Unless you are 100% of your word.
Yep. And the actions back it up.
100%. Like that's the biggest thing. And I'm not perfect. Like I'm not sitting here telling you to do this because I'm doing it. I'm still challenged by it every day. There's certain things, it's just life gets on top of you, and then you've got to take a step back and realize it's like, well, what am I doing? What are my priorities? What's most important for me? Right? Because you can just keep piling it on and thinking more is going to help, but more doesn't help. It's usually less helps because it gives you time and space to understand what is actually most important, because you're just moving too quickly.
So I do think there's this kind of realization that you can be both a masterpiece and a work in progress at the same time. I'd love to know a little bit more about your thoughts around, arriving at a relationship with some of your shit figured out while still understanding that you've got infinite room to grow.
In short, it's self-awareness. Like that would be it. If you're self-aware of what you are and aren't, and you're constantly turning over leaves and rocks and searching, then you don't have a great deal to worry about, right? Because you come into it understanding that that's who you are, right? And then if you also communicate that to your partner, it's like, I don't know everything. I'm challenged here. This is grating on me here. I'm feeling resentment here. I don't understand what you're saying. Can you explain it to me again, right? Like you're having these conversations and you're open with communication, then things will flow smoothly. But the tough thing with a relationship is that we tend to get pretty emotional really quickly. There's this weird thing that happens, especially the longer a relationship goes on, where you believe the other person knows you so well that you shouldn't have to explain it. My wife to this day still says things like, when you explain something, it doesn't mean what you think it means. So I'll say something. I don't actually have an example. She hasn't said it to me before, so maybe I'm getting better at it. But she'll say, it's like, what you said then is not what I heard. That is not the right thing. And I'm sort of looking around the room, find someone else. It's like, did I just sound like I was speaking Klingon here? I felt like that was really clear. Which bit what am I missing? And you ask that question, it's like, which bit did I miss? Where did I go wrong when I communicated with you on that?
I think that sometimes, I know for Nathan and I, it's quite a common experience where it's like, did I not articulate an expectation or a need or a desire effectively as in he didn't actually understand what I was asking at all, or did he understand and was not able to meet that need or chose
or
not
execute
to?
it, or
Yeah, and I think that's a really different thing. It's like, did he get it and not do it, or did he not get it in the first place? And I think that's like been a conversation that we've had quite a few times of like, what's happened here? Where have we gone astray?
And I think there's multiple reasons, there's lots of potential reasons there too. It's either that someone hasn't communicated effectively, or the other person hasn't heard what the other person was saying, and there is a multitude of different things that could have gone on there. But I guess it's about having that conversation and trying to be really clear. Like, if you haven't understood something properly, to say, I'm not really sure what you mean by that, and to dig a little bit deeper.
Yeah, and guys are notoriously pretty terrible at communication from a listening perspective.
Yeah.
Not just a sharing perspective, although we tend to be pretty rubbish at that as well. Again, I'm generalizing here based on my experience. Okay, so if you're a great communicator out there, don't be offended by that. If you are, maybe you should actually have a look at it, just check it out. We're typically pretty poor at listening, and the longer a conversation, the longer a relationship goes for, we get worse and worse at it because we think we've heard it all. She said that before, so we've had this conversation before. So you're joining dots to things that aren't things yet. Like, for example, we're in the process of moving out of this unit, and we've got somebody coming to take photos of our unit. So we're cleaning it up before we get rid of everything out so that we can rent it out. And my wife's sitting out there in the lounge room, I'm sitting there next to her, and she felt the need to explain to me exactly what we had to do in each room to make it clean. Not because I'm hopeless at cleaning, but there was a certain configuration in relation to also then moving it out of the house and what we need, because we're moving from here to a third party place before we move into our new place. So there was like
lots of logistics. If this, then that.
Yeah, it was all going on, right? So it was all happening. And I was sitting there and she was telling me the story about all these different rooms, and this doesn't need to happen until today. The conversation was yesterday. I was like, she goes, what? I was like, what do you mean what? I just said yes. I said, yep, cool, let's do that. She goes, I was expecting a bigger response. And I was like, what do you want from me? You've just told me all this stuff about all the things that we need to do in the room. By the time I get to tomorrow actually doing it, I'm going to have forgotten all that stuff because I didn't write any of it down. And my MO to get in there to clean those rooms was make them tidier than they are now. So that's how I configured the whole conversation, which was like, we didn't even need to have it. That's how I was thinking. Why are we talking about this? So I'm sort of there. So I also we then had that conversation about exactly what I just said to you then. We had that conversation straight after that. But that's her methodology. That's how she works. I understand that she needs to communicate this in great detail. Now, that's probably a byproduct from me not taking direction very well and thinking I already have all the information. So I've actually trained her to do that. I don't want her to do it anymore. So instead of listening more so that she doesn't have to and I just do it, I've stopped listening more and the cycle continues. So it was just an interesting example. It sort of popped up yesterday. I'm like, I'm not doing very well with this. It's just an example of how easy it is to misconstrue or misidentify exactly what's happening in a relationship based on what they've said.
So I'd love to dig into this a little bit more. You spent quite a lot of time in your career talking to dudes and now specifically kind of talking to dads. Where do most men get it wrong in relationships?
Well, it comes back to identifying and understanding who we are before we get into the relationship itself. And what I mean by that is that there's different things that are going to happen throughout your life that you either identify as good or bad. And then when you come into a relationship, they're going to be sort of exacerbated or amplified. You're so used to doing something one way, you come in as a postcard version of it, and then you realize that that's not actually fulfilling because I'm not being me, I'm being someone else. And then there's this whole sort of, it's a battle within yourself to go, well, hey, I really want to do this, but I've never said that. And I've been in this relationship for 5 years. She doesn't know that side of me anymore or at all. I've never explained it. So the first thing is to actually just share with the person. It's like, here's who I am. Here's what I want to do. Like, don't give the Tinder version of yourself. Like, it's just going to go bad, right? It's not going to be great. It's like you're going to end up shooting yourself in the foot. It's like you keep lying to people. And I know lie seems like a pretty strong and tough word, but it's essentially what you're doing.
Misleading.
You're hiding from something.
Actively misleading.
Perfect way to put it. I'll write that down. I'm going to use that one. So yeah, you're actively misleading people, not because it's almost like an unconscious thing. You don't realize you're doing it until you're in too far. And then when push comes to shove, when they don't understand how you feel about something, you get upset because they didn't get it straight away. If they don't get it straight away, then you make that mean that they're not supportive of you. So then this meaning and rhetoric comes up that like the divide starts.
Yeah, and ultimately you could end up resenting your partner because they're not understanding that you actually love doing something, or there's something that was a big part of your life that now that you're with that person you've stopped doing, and that was your own fault. It wasn't their fault.
Yeah, totally. It's just, you just got to give that information to them because they don't know. They're literally basing everything they do based on how you show up. So your relationship is based on your interaction with it, right? There's cause and effect. Show up in one way, you don't say one thing, then your partner's also going to reciprocate by replying and responding in some way. Like my wife finds the need that she has to explain everything in great detail because if she doesn't, then I won't get it. At least if she's done it, then she said it. Now we don't have anything to go back on because, hey, she's giving me all the information, right? So she's covered. Me, I didn't do it. Why didn't you do it? Well, you didn't write it down. So you get these little things, but if you figure yourself out first, and that might be a communication thing, it's also a health thing. It's also like being active. That's right. It's easy to get into a relationship. You go straight to the top, and then eventually you plateau and everything kind of settles down, and that's where we get that whole dad bod. Dad bod turns into lack of focus, lack of motivation. We don't want to get out of the job we hate. We start using terms like we can't, or we don't have time, or we can't afford it. And it's like all of that is just lazy talk. We become less disciplined than we might have been in the past. So being disciplined in those areas, like eating well, sleeping well, looking after your health, being fit, interacting with other people, keeping your relationships going, all of these things, it's like, one of the things that I'm really proud of in my relationship has been the independent nature of it, is that we both don't find it hard to go and do things separately on our own, okay? And there's no resentment if I'm out or she's out or whatever, and we're both very encouraging of it. And I firmly believe that came from my side of the relationship, not to sort of big note or anything, but that was something that I valued, and I just did it intuitively, is that this is important to me, that's important to me, these guys are important to me, right? Playing football is important to me. 2 years into my relationship, prior to getting into our relationship, I was saving up to go to South America. I had all this money saved up. Didn't mean to run into this girl. And then 2 years later, I still hadn't gone, and I eventually had to have the conversation with her because it was starting to get to me. She knew about it. She very much knew about it. And I was like, hon, I even remember where I was. We're walking down the hill, just about to walk into our driveway. We've been on an afternoon walk. The sun was sort of setting over the hills near where we got married. I said to her, hey, listen, I've got to do this South America thing. It's a 6-month thing. I don't expect you to come. I don't expect you to still be here when I get back. But if you would like to come, it would be awesome if you would join me. Would you be interested? And I don't know what I expected. I think I was very unattached to it, but she said, yes, let's do it. So we ended up spending 6 months in South America together. But that was one of those things that I could have not said, and I could have just kept going the way we were going. Because 2 years went by, and we did a Thailand trip in that 2 years, which actually ate into my money, which actually was great fun, but it irked me because I didn't say what I needed to say. So it took me 2 years to get there. So it's these little things that we start to put in play. We need to come at it from, like, what is it that we want to do? What do we want to create? Who do we want to be? What sort of things do we want to do and share, and people we want to be around? It's about asking those questions. And when you get into a relationship, don't stop asking those questions. It's like if you guys were to get into a relationship together right now, it's like the first thing you want to do is you want to find out everything about the other person in relation to what are their hopes and dreams and goals. Because if they don't line up, it's like, where do you see yourself in 10 years? I know they sound like really big questions at the very beginning because there's love and lust and, it's sex and, this animal attraction and everything. But when it gets serious, it's like push comes to shove. Do you want to have kids? It's like you're in a 10-year relationship, you're 33, you've been in it for that long, and then all of a sudden, you don't want to have kids. Oh, right. Would you have been in that relationship for that long? Because I didn't want to have kids. Hand on heart, did not want to have kids. Didn't want to buy a house, didn't want to get married, didn't want to do any of that stuff. And I was open about it. I even naively said it as the best man at my brother's wedding in the best man speech. So I was that guy. I was a bit of a twat back in the day, and she still brings it up, which is full credit to her.
Before turning over the rocks and the...
Totally. And this is where the commitment thing came in. So like in a very, very quick period of time, once that commitment actually took hold, everything started to happen. Like everything started to happen. Like I started figuring out what I wanted to do. We bought 2, 3 4 houses. You know, like she eventually sorted a PhD out and we got that done. We moved to Brisbane, you know, like all these things started to take off. Like we got married, we had a kid, like they all started to happen. And it was that lack of responsibility I was taking for my life, the lack of commitment, because I thought with those two things would have come a lack of freedom. I would have been tied to stuff. But it's actually the opposite, is that the more responsibility you take, the more ownership you take, the more commitment you make, the more freedom you have. Because otherwise you just don't have any power to make any decisions, because no one's going to listen to you because you don't have any responsibility. It's like trying to convince your boss of a new way to go when you can only see this much and they can see the whole picture. It's like, dude, that's just not the right time. And you've been here for 5 minutes. It's like, that's too early, too soon. It's like once you get to that point where you've elevated it and you've proven that you can, and you show up and say, here's what I want, and you go about creating it, and it takes time, that's when you can start to make bigger decisions. You can start to get a little bit more respect. You develop a thicker sort of crust of trust. I've never said that before. I didn't mean to sound like that, but that's what it is. It's like you can dissipate. It's like death by 1,000 cuts. Every time you don't show up, that's what happens, and the trust dissipates a little bit more and a little bit more. So yeah, commitment, responsibility, and then freedom.
So if there's someone who feels like their sense of self is diminishing or has been suppressed for a little while, and they're trying to go about that journey of actually discovering who they are as an individual, what would you say is a starting point or something that they should tackle first?
There's a really good book by Mark Manson called The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. I'm not sure if you guys have read it.
It's up on the cupboard behind us.
Somewhere there.
Can you see it? Yeah.
I was going to say in the red and orange section, that's a really, really good place to start. If not that, then start by learning something. Figure out what you're interested in. Really, really simple. Like you can't go from here to Elon Musk in a week, right? You can't do that. That's not a thing that happens. For that to happen, it takes a long time. So one, understand how much time it's going to take. And essentially the easiest way to look at it is if you start now, you've got until you're dead. That's the way I look at it. It's because like, what else are you going to do? So it's not a short period of time, it's a long period of time. So don't be in a rush to get there, because by the time, so let's just say you did it in 4 years and now you're, 29 or 34 or whatever you are. You don't sit on the beach and drink pina coladas. That's not what happens. It's like, because everybody gets bored on holidays. Everybody gets bored on holidays. Whether you want to admit it or not, you can't do that for long extended periods of time. You'll want to shoot yourself. But what you can do is you can put your time, energy, and effort into something that actually gets you up in the morning. So go and figure out what that is. The first book that I read when I decided to pull my finger out when I was 29 was actually a lie. It was the second book, was The 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss. That was a wicked book, not because of the information in it, as in what I actioned and all the stuff that he tells you to do, but from a perspective shift. That's like, it gave me an idea. It's like, I didn't know that stuff was even a thing. Didn't know it existed. And if that existed, and this is just one book, the next question was, what else is out there that I don't know about? So it was a shift for me. That's where it begins. And then you explore. Like, you're already not doing all this stuff. Instead of reading, you're playing PlayStation. Instead of reading, you're having a few beers at the end of the night. Instead of reading, you're eating shitty food and watching ridiculously silly TV, right? And we're all like, and I watch some Rick and Morty with the best of them. I don't care. But I also read a shit ton, like a lot. And that's the most important thing, is that if you can educate yourself and learn a little bit about the things that you're interested in, then slowly the gaps will start to open up for you. So that would be my biggest thing, is sit down, figure out what you want, write it down on a bit of paper, and then go and do some research. YouTube, podcasts, audiobooks, find people who've done it before, have conversations with some mates who you admire and are inspiring to you. It's like, what I'm saying is no different to what most of the guys out there that write the books say anyway. Well, you're going to start somewhere. You've just got to get started.
Funnily enough, 4-Hour Workweek was one of my very first books that I read too. I think it was probably my very first book I read when I started this journey too.
Have you ever thought what would have happened if you'd never had read that book?
Yeah, I don't know. It would have been probably not a lot, to be honest. That's probably the the realistic answer.
If you'd not read the book is probably quite a predictable answer.
Yeah, very predictable.
Yeah, it would have taken a lot longer. I always think they're really interesting. I think that about my partner. It's like, if I hadn't met her, if we had broken up on the many opportunities that we had, like all these things, I always think about this stuff. And it's like, what was the reading was hard. fixing those challenges. They were hard. Anything good usually comes after something hard. So if you're going through something hard, then there's a very good opportunity. If you keep going, something good's going to come out of it.
So what are a few other things that dads or men can do if they're feeling stuck in a relationship?
Well, they need to be honest with themselves firstly. So they need to take ownership, drop the shit. So take out the excuses around you being stuck. Because a lot of the time we start to blame as opposed to look at ourselves first, right? You need to ask yourself, how did I get into this position? What am I not enjoying about this? And one of the hardest things about a relationship is that it's so personal to you that it's really hard to see how anyone else on the planet would be able to help you through what you're going through. One, who am I going to talk to? What if they laugh at me, make fun of me, think I'm insecure? It's all these different things that people could potentially project onto me. They see I don't have it all figured out like I've been portraying we do. Like all these things start to come up. Is that if you can get past the fear of what you think will happen and then reach out to actually have those conversations and get someone to have a look at it, that's going to be a really big help. It could be a group, it could be one of your best mates, it could be someone you've never met before. Like you can go to your GP, you can get a referral to go and see a psychologist and they give you 12 free sessions for a mental health plan. It's potentially not a mental health thing. Well, actually, I take that back. It absolutely is a mental health thing because what happens next is that you can be pretty destructive. You can do it in the wrong way. Because if you think about a relationship, whether you're married or not, like there is a form of commitment there. You need to understand what it is. And if you don't figure this out now, this hard bit, then there's a good chance you're going to take it into the next one anyway. If you take it into the next one, then the same thing's going to happen again. Or you're going to discount. Your world's going to get a little bit smaller in the next relationship because you go, I can see this happened last time, it's happening again. This happened last time, it's happening again. You've got no idea why it happened. And you're looking at the other person like they've done something wrong. I'm looking for the right person. It's like, well, who are you though? Are you the right person? Is it always them? Because each time you go in a new relationship, again, it's the old adage, you're going to be the common denominator. So being aware of that, of how it's showing up, but then also having a conversation with your partner too. It's like, tell them that you're struggling. Tell them that you don't get what's happening right now. Tell them that this isn't what I signed up for. I signed up for this thing to be, the best part of our life. I get challenges and all that sort of thing, but at the moment it's not great and I need to figure out why. Can we have that conversation? It's like, and again, just because you tried it once doesn't mean, and it doesn't work, doesn't mean it's not going to work, because that's the other thing too. There's no perfect, I can't say anything to you right now that's the perfect answer for you. Like for you guys, for anyone listening, there is no perfect answer. The only perfect methodology is to not give up. Because if I've had this conversation with almost every dad I've spoken to who was divorced, they all said they'd rather be with their partner than divorced, right? So if they're all saying that, then at some point they gave up because it gets hard. It's difficult. I've never been in that position. I hope never to be in that position. It's a conversation Jackie and I have all the time. Not about being divorced, but about, the circumstances that arise. And we're very fortunate. We got we got married a little bit later and we had kids a little bit later than all of our friends. And we've seen a lot of, their relationships capitulate for one reason or another.
Yeah. Max, I love that you shared that because that's one of the reasons that we started the podcast. Multitude, but we saw a handful of our really close mates' relationships, some of them implode, some of them explode. And there was a real disconnect between what couples knew about themselves, each other, and how to navigate life and relationships and the fundamental skills of communication and managing conflict and giving each other constructive feedback and expressing needs and all of the complex skills, and they are skills that are required to have a healthy, happy, thriving relationship, not just with your partner, but with yourself. And watching a few of those things happen and being in quite close proximity to people that you love who are going through that, it'd be hard to not learn something. So yeah, I want to say thank you for sharing that, and that you're obviously having a similar experience where it's like, we can learn from other people's mistakes. Or maybe they're not mistakes, other people's experiences. and shortcut some of those learnings so that we don't have to touch the hot plate to know that it's hot. So thank you. I also just wanted to circle back, like, you know, the only methodology there around like not failing is to not give up. And I really like that. Your big part of the date forever concept is this eternal dating yourself so that you set the tone for the relationship with yourself, setting the tone for every other relationship that you have, romantic or otherwise, so that you can be a well-rounded, interesting, functioning human being inside or outside of that relationship. So I really love the conversation that we've had today. Thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome.
Hey, so you've obviously spoken to a whole heap of guys, men, dads, and I suspect that some of them, when they've been chatting to you, you're the first person that they've opened up to. Why is it so important for guys to step into this and talk to that mate, talk to that friend, talk to that mentor, reach out and get a coach?
Well, I was just thinking about this over the last couple of weeks about my relationship with my dad. And I've thought about that a stack, but a new layer dropped in for me recently because I thought about it from, you know, what he did, what he didn't, what he'd done for me. And then I was thinking a lot more about what he hadn't done. Not because he was neglecting me, but more so because he just didn't know what he didn't know. And I was thinking about conversations like money conversations, finance conversations, investing conversations, relationship conversations, love conversations, challenge, conflict, you know, being married, you know, treating people with respect and all this different stuff. Is that he never had a conversation with me about how to have a good relationship.
I don't think you're unique, unfortunately.
No, I don't think so.
No. And this is where I'm going with it is that you need to have a look where you came from. Now, all I had to go by when it came to relationships was his interaction with my mum. When it came to like a romantic relationship, that's what I had. They were great together, right? They're still together today. So,
but you are probably a bit more unique in that sense, with parents who are still together.
Well, very much so. Yeah, totally. I always say that my upbringing was really boring because everyone else had this
chaos, trauma,
so much stuff going on. Yeah, it was all going on. I was like, we didn't have really any hardships. We weren't wealthy, like enough money to eat and roof over the head and all that sort of stuff. But it was
2 parents who were together and love each other.
It was relatively boring. I know. Who would have thought that was the anomaly in the equation? So I was thinking about this from other people's perspective is that you need to understand where you came from. It's like you go into a relationship, you don't actually have the information you think you have. Well, not all of it anyway. You've got your bit based on your experience. Your wife or your partner or your girlfriend, whoever it is, they've got their bit based on their experience. Like I said before, and like you just articulated, is that I might have been a little bit unique. Mine was a bit boring. Hers could have been very colourful. We aren't on the same page. Her version of a good father figure or a good male figure or a good mother or a good son or a brother or husband and all this sort of stuff is going to be different to yours. Your values aren't going to line up. And this is deep stuff, unconscious stuff that they don't even know they don't know. Like I've had conversations with my wife around why she doesn't like to ask for help. And we went through it. I was like, it's really interesting. It's like, you're so different from your brothers. Your brothers, you know, they went off and, you know, did all sorts of, you know, gnarly stuff, but hated school. And she could see the conflict that they created between her dad and her brothers, who are both older than her, never went to university. And not that that was a catalyst for anything, but that's just what he saw for them, is that they'll go to university and they'll, you know, continue their education. Jackie saw that and she went, okay, cool, right, all right, I'm going to do this. She hasn't stopped studying. Like she's gone all the way through to doctorate, like 97 in a HSC, you know, she was like honors and, you know, but she got it at university. She was just like, boom, top of the shelf. And that was a byproduct of what she saw in her family. It's like, unconsciously, she had no idea she was doing it.
Yeah.
Why she did it.
Max, I love that you touched on this because this is, again, another reason that we started the show and the business and all of it is that as we were dissecting the people who were nearest and dearest to us who had had these really quite disgusting breakups, you know, where they'd really hurt each other a lot, you know, and we sort of started to see the pattern that quite a lot of these couples, either one of the party or sometimes two, had come from a home where they'd never actually seen a healthy, happy, thriving relationship up close. So even if the parents had still been together in some way, shape or form, it didn't necessarily mean that that relationship was happy. And as we kind of just dissected that, I was like, crap, you go out into the world, you meet a person, you step into love, and you go about creating a future together and a relationship together. What if you've never seen what a great one looks like? What if you've never seen the inner cogs or workings of what thriving actually looks like? And now you've got to try and create this thing with no blueprint. How do you do that? Where do you learn that?
Well, you've got to be open to learning it in the first place, which goes back to your question about why do guys need to start communicating better and opening up and having these conversations, is because of that reason, is that you don't know everything you think you know. And your relationship, yes, it is unique to you, but your relationship is no different to anybody else's. There's two people involved in it, both with two different communication styles, two different upbringings, who are trying to figure it out together. And yes, the unique individual circumstances are going to be of your own making. However, if you can understand where they came from, which is no different to anyone else, you understand where your values and your beliefs come from. And typically speaking, we don't understand what we value. Like, you couldn't articulate it. Your actions, if we watched you for long enough, we would be able to identify those. What you said your values were, though, versus what your actions are showing up as, are probably going to be two different things for the majority of us. And then the beliefs are even deeper than that, because we don't know where they came from, for starters. No idea. As in, we understand they probably came back from there somewhere, but typically we're going to suggest that that's just that's what I believe in. I believe in that because of these reasons. Like, it was the thing I came up off my own volition. I was like, well, you have a look at these a little bit closely, but it's the ones that they can't see at all. The actions that they're taking around the beliefs that they've got that they had no idea were baked into them between that ages of 0 to 7. And that's why it's so on my mind at the moment, that 0 to 7 age, because I've got the little fella and his whole MO, his frequency is just absorbed.
Neural pathways connecting.
And then when he gets to 7, totally. To the point where we're actually considering not putting him into school until after 7, right? Is because we want to know where he's getting his information from the majority of the time, right? Not to say he's not going to interact with humans, because he's seen more people than I've seen in the last 8 weeks. Like, he's seen fucking everybody. So that's not the case at all. But it's just like, well, how do you give this kid the best opportunity? Because I understand what happens when you turn 20 and 25 and 30, and the wake of human beings you leave in your zone behind you. I've had a stack of relationships. A lot of them have been long-term ones. So that's probably where I get that from. I've never been the one-night stand guy. Is that all of my relationships, except for like a brief 1-year period right there in the middle, because I'd had so many long-term relationships, and only now starting to realize that that's probably a byproduct from seeing my parents do that in the right way, right? But then the commitment thing is that, well, why can't I commit? And you start to ask yourself questions about, lack of commitment and so on and so forth. But talking to people helps bring that out. Me having this conversation with you, I feel like I'm talking to myself here, because I can't never reiterate this enough. Because you go about your life, you come across different people, it slowly settles to the bottom and you forget it, and then you need to stir the silt up from the bottom to kind of to re-remember.
Or you have an
stuff.
Experience that does it for you.
Yeah, totally. That's why reading is so important.
Shakes
talking
you a little
to people.
bit.
Yeah, groups and coaches and whatever it looks like for you, but you need to be vulnerable enough to go there. If you're not vulnerable enough and you're only giving them just the surface level stuff, it's not going to be worth your time. You think you're talking about it. And everybody's at a different stage. For me and you guys, quite happy to walk into a room full of people and just like pour our hearts out. Some people couldn't think of anything worse. Right, so your level of entry will be different. My level of entry used to be couldn't think of anything worse. There's no fucking chance. That's, man, forget self-help, forget personal development. I didn't even know what they were. What's a coach? No idea, outside of my soccer coach. Didn't know any about any of that up until about the age of, would have been 29, maybe 30, 31. And I'm only 36 now.
Think how great you'll be in another 10.
Yeah.
Well, it wasn't that long ago, that's the point, right? It's like, went from not believing in any of this stuff and like openly shunning it to now being a massive advocate for it because of what it's helped me with. Fast track, it's the absolute amplification, and the thing that's going to 10x everything is opening up and sharing. Because when you get comfortable with that, you'll get comfortable with having bigger conversations with different people. And then it's just about taking a step further and a step further past your edge to be a little bit more bold than you were yesterday. And you stress that muscle, it gets bigger. You do it again, it gets bigger, it gets bigger, it gets bigger. And then, 10, 15, 20, 30 years down the track, you might be Elon Musk. I don't know. But if you don't start with a conversation, you'll never know. You'll never know. You'll always play within yourself, whether it be in life or whether it be in a relationship. And you'll wonder why.
That's a good tie-in to my next question is, can we just go super tactical for a second? If someone, maybe a guy, but someone is listening to this and they're like, do you know what? I do have an inkling to have a bigger conversation. There are some things I need to work through or I want to unpack here. And I've never had a conversation like that with a mate or a partner or a parent or a professional of some sort. What's the real tactical? Where do they start?
It's interesting. I've got a group for dads, and I often get guys pop in and out of that, and they will tell me some stuff they've never told anyone before. And it's one thing that got brought up yesterday with a guy I'd never spoken to before. We were talking about doing a podcast together in the next few weeks, and he called it the barbershop effect. Going to the barbershop, or for the ladies, it might be the hairdresser, and you just talk. You tell people stuff about yourself. There's very little, sometimes might even come from the other side, in the barbershop version of this, in the hairdresser side. Whereas the guys are just happy to sit there. However, when you get into that environment where no one's been there before, you've never met that person before, there's no judgment. So you remove that judgment. So if you go to that person, you can find that person, which is why I mentioned the GP thing. Getting a referral, having a conversation there, just so you can say it out loud for the first time ever, because you'll get this weightlessness feeling. That'll be the first thing that you'll notice, is that this whole weight gets lifted off your shoulders. I just got goosebumps thinking about it, because it happens like every time. Outside of that, that's what I offer guys, is that if you want to have a conversation about something you've never told anyone before because you're afraid of what's going to happen, come and have a conversation with me. I'll talk to you. No dramas. But if it's not me, then you need to go and have a look for someone that it could be. Right? And it's not always someone who's been through it, because what you'll find is that it's not about them giving you solutions. It's about you getting it off your chest and being heard. Because one of the values, and you guys know this from being through so much of Tony Robbins stuff, is that one of our values is it's about significance, not being heard. We don't feel like we're of value or significant in any way, shape or form, because no one's listening to us. I'm doing everything for everyone else. I'm doing it for my wife. I'm doing it for my kids. I'm doing it to keep a roof over our head. And I was like, nobody likes a martyr. And that's what you're being. But no one's willing to call you out on it. It's like, I know you're doing it for those reasons. However, what have you done for yourself lately? Go to the gym. Have a conversation with a friend. Have a conversation with a coach. Have a conversation with someone, an elder or somebody like that.
Yeah, this is super interesting too, because I had the pleasure or the delight of watching a conversation unfold with Nath and one of his mates, and like long-term mates. And they hadn't caught up for a while, and I just had happened to be there while they're having a beer. And Nath's mate had been seeing a therapist and opened up about it and was like, man, I've been working through this stuff. Like, I've been having, trying to work through these couple of issues that are showing up in my relationship with, my partner, but also my parents and my siblings and stuff. And it was I feel like so blessed to have seen this interaction unfold, but it was like this mate put this stuff on the table and Nath was able to go, yeah, me too. And I think that we don't give our mates enough respect, that maybe they're going through stuff too. And maybe there's stuff that they would like to talk about. And it would just take one of you to be like, can we go for a proper beer? Or can we go for a proper walk? And they will meet you where you're at, obviously with respect and not, just vulnerability dumping on someone. But it was like such a beautiful thing to watch, where these two mates who really love and care about each other had been going through these things at the same time and not talking to each other. And they probably could have been helping each other the whole way through.
I think that might be the best point of the whole conversation that you just made there. I could not agree more. It's one of the hardest things to do, though. Like, kudos to your friend for reaching out And even more power to you for sitting there to listen to him. I think that's massive. That's been one of the biggest struggles I've had with my mates. Basically, my fear was I was so afraid of what they thought, and coupled with the history we had together, because the guy I was showing up as now is not the guy that they began their friendship with. And typically what happens was, and I'm not sure if this is the same thing you found with a lot of your mates, Nathan, is you find that you typically go into a conversation with these guys and you will quickly go back into reminiscing about what had happened in the past as opposed to speaking about what's going on now. It's that now stuff is so important.
And it's so easy to do.
Yeah, well, hey, you think about the music you listen to. Think about some of the music you listen to that makes you the happiest. It's the ones that take you back to the memories of your most fondest years. Right, you should see my record collection. It's like all the ones that I went out and bought are all the ones that came from those years. It's like, what am I going to buy? It's like, I'm not going to buy anything new. I'll just Spotify that. I'll go and buy some shit I already know is really good, right? Because I've got to spend $50 on it. It's like, yeah, no, perfect. That's exactly the album I'm going to get, right? And it's the same with your mates. You go back to that. It's like you haven't seen them in ages. They remind you of a better time, so to speak. But that discounts what's going on from now, which is what's so powerful about what you just shared, Sammy. I think that's awesome. I reckon that's actually the tactic.
Yeah, and I think it does. It takes one person to be willing to go there first and be a little bit brave and lean into the discomfort. And I think, if you've done that with care and consideration and, chosen the person, I think it's pretty likely that they'll meet you with that, match you at that vulnerability. Hey, Max, this has been a really cool conversation. Thank you so much for joining us for the second time. Very, very cool. As you know, obviously a lot of this conversation has been about taking accountability and being the change in your own life, but we really fundamentally believe about being the change that you want to see in the world too. So we've supported a climate action project that's about taking immediate action, help slow some of the impact. So we've made a contribution to help save 1 square metre of the Daintree rainforest. This project's looked after by Rainforest Rescue, and we've made it possible by our partnership with Buy One, Give One. So thank you so much for helping us make that change.
Awesome. Thank you, guys.
No worries. So, Max, if people want to connect with you or want to learn a little bit more about what you do, how should they do that?
There's a couple of ways. You can get me at Instagram at the Dad AF Project. You can get me on my email, max at the Dad AF Project, or hit me up on Facebook. If you type in Max Latimer, you'll find me there.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much, Max.
Awesome, guys. Really appreciate it.
Thanks heaps for joining us. If you love what we're doing here and want more, subscribe to the Date Forever podcast to make sure you never miss an ep. Come and hang out with us and other awesome couples who are fueling up their relationships in the Thriving Couples Collective Facebook group, or check us out at fuelcollective.com.au. Until next time, keep on dating, because better relationships equal a better world.